I've been being coached by both sound and voice people to use a bigger voice when I'm up here speaking, giving Sunday service. So I'm going to say, wow. I really love being up here with this thing. It just changes the whole church. I'm going to look for the thumbs up from Karen. She's my coach. Isn't this fabulous? We had an event here last night. Yes. And this extraordinary inspiration through Ananda Prem, Karen, and many others, maybe even all of us, just because of the way all of our energy is connected. Who knows where those thoughts and inspirations come from, but this is what they manifested. Obviously, our masters around the world, bringing peace around the world, bringing themselves, their energy, their love. It's just quite extraordinary. I mean, you can't miss the message. This morning, I was very early this morning watching a talk that Jyotish and Devi were giving in India. They're traveling in India right now, and they were, I actually missed the first half of it because I miscalculated the time, but I'm not sorry that I did because it was supposed to start at 3 in the morning. So I managed to start with them at 3:30. But, and they were talking about Kriya Yoga, so that it's not about the talk that I would talk, but the stage where they were was set so beautifully. There was this exquisite picture of Paramhansa Yogananda and Swami Kriyananda. You see some new faces. So Swami Kriyananda, who founded Ananda, was what we call a direct disciple of Yogananda, meaning he actually was alive when he was alive and he lived with him. And everything that is Ananda, all of these colonies, I mean, just everything. It would be hard to tell you the structure of our service. Everything really came from Master through Swamiji to all of us. But there's a big sign where they're speaking, made by the people in Chennai where they are, that said, as Master said, the time for knowing God has come. And it was just so wonderful, and they did the peace and harmony prayer at the end of their talk. So here you are in this just trick of time and space, but they're in India, and it's already late tonight, and you're here, and they're doing all these prayers, and they're really having a sign up that says the time for knowing God has come, and we have this up which shows the divine has manifested here. And I realized, I mean, it was very touching to me, really very touching to feel the power of what we're doing around the world. And it was right in my living room. But this peace and harmony prayer that we're doing, there were, I don't know how many people were in the audience. They didn't say, yeah, we'll find out. But it sounded like hundreds. And here we are, and in places all over the world, everybody's just surrounding the globe like these masters are, and holding the world in this knowing of peace and harmony. It's extraordinarily powerful. We're saying it all the time, we meaning all of Ananda, and everybody really might start doing this in your own homes whenever you think of it. You know, Swami Kriyananda said that if everybody, he first said meditate, but if everybody could meditate, he said, for 15 minutes a day, but then he changed that to if everybody could just stop and sit with a feeling of calmness for 15 minutes a day, it would change the whole world in ways that we can't imagine, I'm sure. 15 minutes a day. Our energy, connected as it is to energy everywhere, that's why I was saying even about the inspiration and the manifestation of this, is that looks like it came through Ananda Prem and Karen, of course it did, but we're all so much a part of their lives. How could we begin to separate out, that we're so connected in ways that we can't imagine. That's why thoughts are universal and not individual, and they are. And we see it here, and I felt it just this morning. So 15 minutes a day, Swamiji said, and we can change the world. This past 3 weeks, I've been in I'm going to call it a semi-seclusion, because for those of you who have ever been in a seclusion, usually we go away, usually we're unplugged completely, no phones, no televisions, no computer. It's actually quite extraordinary, but this time I had to stay local, so I did it in my home, and it was a little different. I had to come out twice a week to do some physical therapy, which is why I stayed. Of course, when you leave our community and you go 2 blocks, you're on El Camino ramp. You really have to sort of take yourself very much inside to stay in seclusion that way. But nonetheless, for almost 3 weeks, it means not speaking to anybody. And you know, it's sort of easy to go out into the world like to a physical therapist or somebody who doesn't need anything from you. They're not asking anything of you. They're not relating in a really deep way. I fell in love with my physical therapist. She's perfect, she's lovely, but it's still easy to stay inside. So, for all intents and purposes, I was in seclusion. And many of you have done this, I know, but it's like a mini version of the teachings and life. For the first few days, you know, I speak for myself, I've been traveling close to the speed of light almost all the time, and then suddenly you have 3 weeks off and you're going to stop. And it's challenging. There's quite a bit of restlessness that happens. So because I was home, things could happen this time, like closets getting cleaned and things that I've had on my list for years, literally. Not bad, wasn't bad. It's just calming down and going from a more high energy sort of going state into a calm inner place. And it starts happening just like that. You really start calming down. You really get fine with the fact that you're in total silence, that you'll be still actually many hours of the day. And then what starts happening, and I know this is not just my experience, this is why Master said seclusion is the price of greatness. Now, he didn't say or mean that everybody needs to do it for 3 weeks. I remember my last really big medical job with a big medical practice. I would take 3 weeks off to go on vacation, you know, like to Bhutan to climb some mountains or to Alaska. And my partners and all of the other doctors would say to me, "What in the world are you going to do with yourself for 3 weeks?" It was just impossible for them to imagine, never mind sitting perfectly still and quiet. So seclusion to some people might mean a morning a week or a couple of hours a week. But whatever it is, when you put down all responsibility, all of the need to take care of any business or anybody, it's remarkable what can happen. That you can actually start hearing things, knowing things, seeing in the way that our reading's talking about seeing God. So in all those ways that have nothing to do with the physical body, they have nothing to do with the senses and the way that we're used to moving through the world. Not like that, because with the physical eyes, we see the material world. Just like Swamiji says in the reading, with the third eye, we see spirit. We see a superconscious world. It's very different. And I realized that seclusion, that period of time, wherever it is. And that progression is just a mini version of what it means to be living our lives on a spiritual path. But to be taking that time to do it so consciously. And it was just so perfect for this reading today and for this question, can man see God? I'm going to just tell you a little joke that I think many of you have heard, but it's so appropriate for today. There was a little girl, a student, and she was in a class, and the class was given a drawing assignment. They were allowed to draw anything they want. And so the teacher walked over to her and said to her, "Oh, what are you drawing?" And she said, "I'm drawing God." And the teacher said, "Now, Mary, nobody knows what God looks like." And she said, "Well, they will in just a couple of minutes." You know, it's funny, but it's really through a child's eye, through that undistorted, unblemished eye. I decided when I knew I was having this seclusion that I would take the time to study Patanjali and his teachings, because I've never really gone deep with them. So for pretty much 3 weeks, many hours of the day, I listened to talks about Patanjali. I'm going to try and speak a little bit about it. I have 20 minutes left. Asha spoke about the Patanjali book for about a year and a half, I was told. Jyotish and Devi did it for weeks and weeks and weeks, all day. So, but it was really interesting, and Gyan Dev and many people, to be able to read Patanjali, for those of you who may not know, was considered to be the expert on yoga. And not, he lived thousands of years ago, but not yoga as in Hatha yoga, the way we think of it, but in yoga as a state of being. And yoga that really means, ultimately, that stillness of mind, that, and I'm going to talk a little bit about it, where, in fact, we can see God. The only place from which we can see God. I love that little saying from the Little Prince, a line from The Little Prince, where he writes, and I've loved this, I don't know how long ago that book was written. I meant to look it up this morning, and I didn't, but where he says, "It is only with the heart that we can see rightly what is essential, is invisible to the eyes." And I've always loved that. It's like this knowing. And this is, Patanjali wrote in what we call sutras or aphorisms, these little phrases. And they're very, they're brief. And for years and years in this life alone, but I think probably many people for many lifetimes have not really been able to understand Patanjali. And there hasn't been a great explanation of those teachings, at least that many people I know could find, including myself. Reading the explanation was as difficult as just reading Patanjali. And then Swami Kriyananda wrote a book based on the teachings of Yogananda called, and I even love the title, Demystifying Patanjali. And he expounded on each of these sutras. So I'd like to speak just a little bit about it, because what Patanjali wrote is the answer probably to every question we could ask in life. It's essentially the probably most concise condensation of all of the Vedas, all of the teachings in India, all of the spiritual teachings, really ever, that underlie all great religions. And he put it into these less than 200 little sentences. So maybe if I were up here speaking about anything, I would say I'll use Patanjali's teachings. But it just seemed so relevant today to talk about, can man see God? Because what Patanjali does is he takes us through in a absolutely the most profound way exactly how to see God. And I say that very literally because there are three philosophies in Indian teachings. The first is Sankhya, which is the why. Why would we want to move away from what we know in life as we know it? And the Sankhya teaching, we don't have to practice. We need to just start letting go of what keeps us from attaining enlightenment, because we already are that. There's nothing to learn about it. It's not in a book. It's a state of being. It's what our hearts are longing for. It's who we really are. And these masters have made this path so simple for us, so absolutely simple. Let's just borrow a phrase from Nike. Just say yes. It's that easy. It's amazing. I'm going to end with this, as I've gone a little over, and I apologize. Ram Bhakta sends out I forget what they're called now, but the joke of the week, I think it's called. And I'm sorry you can't all see this. And I know you can't, but maybe who's ever up front can. But it's these two guys, nondescript guys. One's carrying a yoga mat, and the other one's looking at him, and he says, "So all these years, you never did yoga. You just walked around carrying the mat?" Don't walk around carrying the mat. Do the yoga. It's been made to be so pleasurable, so much fun. Look around you. Look at who you get to do it with. Look at who you get to practice with. Look who's helping you have inspirations like this. Why not step right into it and say, absolutely, yes, this is a commitment I'm making right now. Turn my energy, bring all the joy I can, bring everything I can to beginning to know God.